You felt motivated. You promised yourself this time would be different. You woke up inspired, and still you failed again. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't want it badly enough, but because motivation lied to you. Nobody talks about this part. They tell you to stay motivated, but they never tell you why motivation keeps fading, why discipline collapses, and why strong intentions still lead to the same results. Today, we're exposing the real reason you keep failing even when you feel motivated. And once you understand this, you will never look at your struggle the same way again. Motivation feels powerful in the moment. It arrives like a rush of energy, a sudden belief that this time you will finally change your life. You wake up early, you make promises, you feel unstoppable. But motivation is an emotion, and emotions are temporary. They rise when things feel hopeful and disappear the moment life gets heavy. Your problems, however, are permanent until you face them. Bills still exist. Responsibilities don't pause. Pressure doesn't care how inspired you felt yesterday. When motivation fades, confusion sets in. You start questioning yourself. What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. You simply trusted something that was never designed to last. Motivation was never meant to carry you through stress, boredom, exhaustion, or failure. It shows up when conditions feel right and vanishes when they don't. That's why relying on motivation creates inconsistency. You move forward only when you feel good, and stop the moment it becomes uncomfortable. Real progress demands something stronger than a feeling, something that remains. When excitement is gone and resistance takes over, you keep chasing new results while holding on to the same identity. You say you want success, discipline, confidence, but deep down, you still see yourself as someone who quits, someone who struggles, someone who starts but never finishes. And that self-image quietly controls everything you do. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of who you believe you are. That's why trying harder doesn't work. Effort without identity change always collapses under pressure. Every action you take is a vote for the person you think you are. If you see yourself as not consistent, skipping one day feels normal. If you see yourself as undisciplined, quitting feels familiar, even comfortable. You're not broken, you're just being loyal to an old version of yourself. Real change begins when you stop asking, "What do I want to achieve?" and start asking, "Who must I become?" When identity shifts, behavior follows naturally, and discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like alignment. Most people don't start because they're committed, they start because they're emotional. Something hurts. Something scares them. A failure, a rejection, a moment of shame pushes them to say, "I'm done living like this." That emotional surge feels powerful, almost unstoppable. You feel focused, driven, alive. But emotions are reactive, not reliable. They respond to moments, not long journeys. Once the pain fades or life distracts you, that emotional energy disappears. And so does your momentum. Commitment is different. Commitment doesn't depend on how you feel. It doesn't need excitement or urgency. It shows up quietly, especially on days when there's no motivation at all. When you start from motivation feels unstoppable when life is calm. When there's time, energy, and everything is going your way. Motivation convinces you that you can handle anything. But the moment pressure shows up, its limits are exposed. Stress drains it. Boredom suffocates it. Exhaustion silences it. Motivation doesn't know how to survive real life. It works best in perfect conditions, and life is rarely perfect. You overestimate motivation because it feels intense at the beginning. That intensity tricks you into believing it's strong enough to carry you through obstacles. But motivation doesn't wake you up when you're tired. It doesn't push you when progress feels invisible. It doesn't stand firm when distractions are louder than your goals. When resistance appears, motivation negotiates. It looks for excuses. It asks for comfort. And slowly, without you noticing, it steps aside. That's why relying on motivation alone makes failure feel confusing and personal. You assume something is wrong with you, when in reality you trusted a tool that was never built for pressure, persistence, or pain. You don't fail because you can't handle the goal. You fail because you avoid the hardest part of the process. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. Progress feels fast. Effort feels rewarding. But then the work becomes repetitive. The results slow down. The discomfort grows. And that's where most people stop. Not because they're incapable, but because it no longer feels good. Discomfort is misunderstood. You interpret it as a warning sign, as proof that something is wrong, when in reality it's evidence that growth is happening. The mind searches for relief, not progress. So you skip the workout, delay the task, choose comfort over effort and call it rest or timing. Avoidance feels harmless in the moment, but it quietly erases momentum. One skipped day becomes a pattern. One excuse becomes a habit. And soon, the dream feels distant again. Not because you weren't strong enough, but because you walked away when the work stopped rewarding you emotionally. You have goals written in your mind, maybe even written on paper. But goals without structure are just wishes. Motivation pushes you to start, but without a clear system. You rely on willpower every single day, and willpower gets tired. When there's no routine, every decision becomes a battle. You waste energy asking yourself when to start, how to start, and if you even feel like starting at all. Structure removes that struggle. It tells you what to do before your emotions get a vote. Without it, motivation fades and chaos takes over. You miss days, then weeks, and suddenly you feel lost again. It's not because you didn't want it badly enough, it's because you had no framework to support your effort. Progress doesn't come from big emotional moments. It comes from small actions repeated in the same way, at the same time. Even on days when nothing inside you feels inspired. Structure carries you forward when motivation disappears. And consistency becomes possible when decisions are already made. You're constantly at war with yourself. Every mistake becomes proof that you're not enough. Every delay feels like personal failure. You punish yourself with harsh words, guilt, and self-criticism, thinking it will force you to work harder. But the truth is, beating yourself up doesn't build discipline, it destroys trust between you and yourself. Every time you choose shame over strategy, you make it harder to show. Discipline isn't punishment. It's training. It's about teaching yourself to act even when you don't feel like it. guiding yourself with consistency instead of fear. Real growth comes from small victories, from keeping promises to yourself, from showing up even when your emotions resist. When you stop fighting yourself and start coaching yourself, failure loses its power. Every small action builds confidence. Every repeated effort rewires your brain to believe you are capable. Self-trust becomes stronger than excuses, and momentum begins to carry you forward naturally. Without the need for constant external motivation, you quit too early because you expect results. Before the process has time to work, you give yourself days to achieve what actually takes months. When progress doesn't show up quickly, doubt starts whispering. You begin to feel invisible, like your effort doesn't matter. You work, you try, you sacrifice, and nothing seems to change. That silence feels personal. It feels like rejection. But real progress is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't reward you immediately. In the beginning, growth happens beneath the surface, where no one claps and no one notices, not even you. Most people stop right there. They mistake slow progress for no progress. They confuse patience with weakness. They walk away just before momentum starts building. Fast results are addictive, but lasting results are slow. Discipline is forged in waiting. Strength is built in repetition. The people who win aren't more talented, they're just willing to stay. When the results aren't visible yet, they understand that time is not the enemy. Impatience is. You didn't fail because you lacked motivation, you failed because you depended on it. Motivation is only a spark. It can start the fire, but it cannot keep it burning. When you treat motivation as the fuel instead of the signal, you build your entire effort on something unstable. The moment emotions shift, everything collapses, and you assume the dream wasn't meant for you. The truth is, your strategy never matched the reality of the journey. You needed systems for tired days, rules for distracted days, and habits for painful days. Motivation shows you why you want to change, but strategy decides how you show up when it gets hard. Without a plan, motivation turns into frustration. With the right structure, even low-energy days move you forward. The strongest people aren't the most inspired, they're the most prepared. They don't wait to feel ready. They design their lives so action becomes automatic. When emotion fades, strategy remains, quietly carrying them forward while others stop and wonder what went wrong.